Columbus, Ohio, April 1st, 2006. The city's Short North district buzzed with life. College students crowded the sidewalks, neon lights flickered across storefronts, taxis crawled through intersections, and the air was heavy with music spilling from bars. Among the thousands of faces weaving through the streets that night was 27-year-old Brian Schaefer. A second-year medical student at Ohio State, Brian had spent much of his week studying for exams, but tonight, he was determined to let loose. Friends say Brian was the kind of person who carried two sides within him. On one hand, the hard-working medical student, focused and determined. On the other, a dreamer who loved Pearl Jam, talked about running away to a beachside town, and sometimes felt trapped in the strictures of his chosen path. That Friday night, Brian grabbed dinner with his father, Randy. They shared food, conversation, and the quiet bond of two men learning to live after tragedy. Just weeks earlier, Brian's mother, Renee, had died unexpectedly of cancer. Her loss weighed heavily on Brian. He rarely spoke about it, but those close to him noticed the heaviness in his eyes. That evening, though, he seemed upbeat, laughing with his dad, mentioning the trip he and his girlfriend Alexis had planned, a getaway to Florida over spring break. After dinner, Brian told his father he'd be going out with friends. Hours later, Brian joined his classmate, William Clint Florence, at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a second-floor bar with a reputation as a loud, crowded hub for college nightlife. It was just after midnight. The night began, like countless others. Drinks were poured, stories exchanged, music thundered. Strangers became fast friends. Brian laughed, danced, and talked. He looked like any other young man enjoying a night out. No sign, no warning, that by the next sunrise, he would be gone. The Ugly Tuna sat high above the street. To reach it, patrons had to take an escalator or stairway up to the bar's entrance. The entire building, including its exits, was under constant surveillance. That night, the security cameras rolled. At 1:15 a.m., footage shows Brian arriving at the bar with Clint and another friend. He's smiling, relaxed. At 1:55 a.m., the camera catches him outside the entrance again. He's speaking casually with two young women. He gestures with his hands, leans slightly forward, then straightens. Moments later, he waves goodbye and walks back toward the bar's front door. And that is the last known image of Brian Schaefer. Incredibly, no footage exists of him leaving. Every exit was covered, every camera running. His friends left. Dozens of strangers filtered out, and yet Brian never appeared again. It's as if he vanished inside a box that had only one way in and one way out. When morning came and Brian didn't answer his phone, his girlfriend Alexis grew worried. She called repeatedly, texted, but no response. By Sunday, after Brian failed to show up for a trip they had planned, alarm gave way to fear. His father reported him missing. Investigators swarmed the bar. They pulled security footage. They interviewed every friend, every staff member. They traced the timeline second by second. And still, there was nothing. The Ugly Tuna was a fortress of eyes. Cameras covered the escalator, the street below, the bar entrance. No one could have slipped out unseen. Unless Brian found another way. Detectives considered possibilities. Could he have changed clothes inside the bar and slipped out disguised as another patron? Could a blind spot in the cameras have swallowed his image? Or did he never leave at all? That last theory haunted investigators, that something happened inside the bar, violence, accident, or confrontation, and someone ensured Brian never walked back out. Yet no evidence was ever found, no trace of a struggle, no reports of disorder, nothing to suggest foul play, just a man who walked into a bar and never returned. Brian's disappearance gave rise to theories, some logical, others chilling. Some believe Brian left the bar unnoticed, perhaps sneaking through a service exit or construction area.
But these paths, investigators argued, would have been treacherous and difficult to navigate, especially for someone who had been drinking. Others suspect foul play. Could Brian have been attacked, lured into a trap? But if so, where was the evidence? Why was there no panic inside the bar, no witnesses? And then, there's the more unsettling possibility. Brian was known to talk about leaving behind medical school, about running away to a different life. Could he have staged his disappearance? Some point to the haunting irony of the night, April Fool's Day, a night of mischief, jokes, and false appearances. Could Brian have walked away from everything on purpose? But those closest to him reject this. Brian adored his girlfriend. He remained close to his father. He had future plans. His sudden disappearance, they argue, was not an escape, but a fracture. And still, the question remains. If Brian wanted to vanish, how could he do so without being seen? In the days after his disappearance, friends, family, and volunteers plastered Columbus with missing posters. His photograph, smiling, brown hair, warm eyes, stared out from street poles, coffee shops, and bus stops. Search dogs were deployed, rivers combed, abandoned buildings swept. Nothing. Not a wallet, not a shoe, not a single clue. Brian's phone rang for days after his disappearance. Friends said the calls would go through, then roll to voicemail. Each time hope flickered. Was Brian alive, reaching for help? But the phone company explained it as a quirk of cellular towers, a false signal, another cruel trick in a case already wrapped in confusion. By the end of spring, investigators had exhausted every lead. His friends were questioned, some more than once. His father pleaded publicly for information. Alexis, his girlfriend, left voicemails that went unanswered, each one more heartbreaking than the last. And then, silence. The Ugly Tuna closed its doors in 2018, but the building remains, a reminder of the mystery locked inside its walls. Over the years, rumors have flourished. People claim to see Brian in distant towns. Anonymous tips trickle in, none confirmed. Some speak of darker truths, that someone that night knew what happened, that silence protects them, that answers exist buried under years of denial and fear. And yet, no one has ever been charged, no remains have ever been found. His father, Randy, never stopped searching. Until his death in 2022, he carried hope and grief in equal measure, hoping for a breakthrough, grieving for the answers that never came. Today, only Brian's younger brother Derek and his loved ones carry the weight forward. What happened to Brian Schaefer? Did he walk away into another life? Did he fall victim to a crime that has remained hidden all these years? Or did the bar itself, with its shadows, its blind spots, its secrets, conceal a tragedy no one dared to reveal? In mysteries like these, the facts become fragile. They bend under the weight of speculation, of rumor, of the passage of time. But the image remains. Brian Schaefer, standing outside the Ugly Tuna at 1:55 a.m., smiling, laughing, turning toward the entrance, and vanishing forever.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing, sharing, and supporting this series. Each story we tell is another voice kept alive, another reminder that answers may still be waiting in the dark. Until next time, stay watchful, stay safe, and never stop asking the questions that linger in silence.